This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, we've been kind of a team that's done that all year, and a kind of a team that's finished it. But like I said, I mean, those are things we can clean up. We obviously got to be better at 8 goals. It's unacceptable. I think every guy in this dressing room can say the same. I think every guy on their side can say the exact same thing too. You don't see these every day, but one thing we can learn from this is we know we got a team, big group of one in here, and everyone will stick up for each other. And we have a really good hockey team. And like I said, we're just gonna get better, clean it up.
Got to get better, right?
Got to clean it up.
Can't let this linger. Can't have that. Hopefully a win tonight against the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have been playing well. Rick Bowness, partner since he took over as coach back on January 12th, 13-2-3. Now they're coming off a loss in overtime last night to the Kings 5-4, but we know they can be tough, and they're right there, fighting for a playoff spot. So we talk about games that are going to be meaningful for the opposition. Columbus should be ready to go, and they have a team. They can play. They've got some guys who can score, and obviously playing a certain way under Rick Bowness.
Well, offensively, they are similar to Buffalo in that they are very dangerous off the rush.
Yeah.
Actually, I asked John Cooper this morning, what do you want to see from your team as far as how they defend off the rush? He said against Buffalo, he kind of laid it on the defense, where he said we were a little too much all in. I mean, I think that was certainly true on the 7-7 goal, where Zucker got loose on a counter. But Columbus can do this to any opponent. They are very dangerous off the rush. They've been this sort of team for the last couple of years, even though they had the coaching change this year. So we want to see the Lightning play better defensively. This is a team, it's hard to defend really well against Columbus because they have enough skill, and the way they play lends itself to generating scoring chances. What Columbus has done since Rick Bowness took over, and they actually won their final game under Dean Evason, so that number is actually an extra win if you just go back over their streak, 14-2-3 in the last 19 games, which is outstanding. I will just add, going 14-2-3, they're still out of the playoffs. They're still outside the playoff cut line on the wrong side of the playoff cut line, which just goes to show how hard it is to make up ground if you're not in an advantageous position. Having said that, they can make the playoffs. I think they actually will make the playoffs. I mean, I am impressed with their team. I do think they're going to be one of the 8. I may be wrong. We'll see. But what they have been able to do, even when they didn't start the season well, and going back to last year when they almost made the playoffs, score a lot, give up a lot. What was happening when Bones took over, and I can go to their game by game and actually look to see exactly how this unfolded. I think when Bones took over, I'm looking at their goals allowed. They were holding teams in many instances to 2-1. I see a shutout. They actually beat Dallas 1-0. That was the game before they beat the Lightning in Columbus. But you mentioned they had an overtime loss to LA. They lost 5-4 in overtime. That was at home yesterday. That was a makeup game. It was actually after they had played the Lightning. The Kings were supposed to come in. There was that bad snowstorm in Columbus, so they pushed the game to yesterday. It was played at 4 o'clock. So Columbus got in not as late as they would have had the game been played at 7 o'clock, but they're not here this morning. They've been given the morning off. So they are playing the second half of a back-to-back against Lightning, who are not playing the second half of a back-to-back, which is a reversal of the first 2 meetings. In the first 2 meetings, both in Columbus, the Lightning were completing a back-to-back. Columbus wasn't. Columbus won both. This was not going to be a back-to-back for the Jackets until they got that game added, which they played yesterday, lost in overtime. The game before that, which they played on Saturday, also at home against Utah, they lost 5-4 in overtime. So 2 overtime losses, but what's the common denominator here? 5 goals allowed in both. Right. So I'm going back a few games here. They had an overtime loss to the Islanders, 4-3. They had a win over Nashville. At the Rangers, 5-4. That was an overtime win they had in New York. They actually had a 4-0 lead in that game and gave up 4 goals in the third period. They did win it in overtime. But what are you hearing from me? That goals against number is starting to creep up again. it is going to be hard to win games when you are giving up 4 goals.
Sure.
You can win some of them. They're good enough to score and outscore their problems. But I think when they were really on that hot stretch, which you could make the argument they're still on a hot stretch, but they're getting points. Now they're really having to lean on their scoring, though, to get points. So I think they're going to need to be better defensively. I mean, I still think they're going to get into the playoffs. They have so much talent. Marchenko, Mason Marchment, Fantilli, Kent Johnson's a terrific player. He's having a great year for them as Charlie Coyle. They picked up Connor Garland, sneaky good pickup.
He's good.
He's got a lot of skill. He had 2 goals for them yesterday. They can score, and they've got Werenski, who's one of the best defensemen and one of the best offensive
players.
defensemen.
He's best players in the league, right?
One of the
he's
best
just
players
really
in the
good.
NHL.
Yeah.
He's got 20 goals this year. So he's tied for second among defensemen in goals. He's tied for second among defensemen in points. He's got 66 points.
Right.
They can deal offensively. Right. What has been their problem, certainly as they've gotten competitive, which I think they were competitive last year and they are competitive this year, is too many goals allowed. So I don't know that we're going to see another 8-7 game. I don't think the Lightning would want that sort of a game. They would prefer to, find a way to win this game, maybe 4-2, 3-1. That would be great. Obviously, they want to win it. They want to play better defensively. But the opposition is a challenging one to basically suffocate. And, we'll see how this game plays out. There is no question, though, the Lightning have to be better overall defensively than what we've seen from them since the break. And certainly this was a problem in Sunday's game. Their penalty kill really caused a lot of problems for them. I mean, Columbus is a middle-of-the-pack power play team, but, they have done well against the Lightning when they've had power plays this year. They even when they haven't scored, they've looked dangerous on their power play opportunities in the first 2 meetings against the Lightning. I think we're going to see Merzlikins tonight, too. The Lightning saw Jet Greaves in the first 2 games, but Greaves played yesterday. So probably Merzlikins, he's kind of the 1B for them this year. I think Greaves has kind of taken over the number 1, but I mean, Merzlikins does play. It's not like, he's playing 1 out of every 6 games or anything like that.
Lightning.
So it's about 2-1. So Greaves plays 2, Merzlikins plays 1, thereabouts.
Lightning will be without 2 players tonight as well.
Yes.
Darren Radish and Eric Chernak. Chernak, we saw the nasty fall.
Day to
with
day.
his scrum. Day to day.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And Darren Radish, of course, with his father passing, attending to those.
Yeah, so he's
matters.
not even in town. But Gage Gonsalves returns.
That is
tonight.
That's a big one
Yeah.
because look what led to all the Buffalo stuff. Was Gonsalves had been hurt.
Right.
From a Darlene hit. It's good to see him back in the lineup. So again, the Lightning have had this situation all year long where they lose a couple, they get a couple. They lose a couple, they get a couple. So I think from that perspective, it's going to be interesting. I will be interested to see how the Lightning respond playing on home ice tonight, knowing that they're coming off a game where everybody on the Lightning side, I think at least openly talked about, partner, that they liked the effort. They liked a lot of the jam that they played with. But giving up 8 goals, unacceptable. But it was almost like that was the second part of the game. Like, we're going to get that fixed. 8 goals, yeah, that's not going to happen every game. What I liked was the compete level and having everybody's back. Okay, fine. But you better right that ship tonight.
So I'm not sure John Cooper is completely on board with that narrative because Eric Erlinson asked him today.
Did he ask him?
Well, he said Brandon Hagel said that,
Yeah.
That sort of a game brings the team. I'm not sure if he said brings the team together, but kind of accentuating the positive. And Coop was like, in what way? Like he went back and he's like, in what way? He's like, I didn't say that. Brandon had said that. And Coop said, well, you'd have to ask Brandon. That's what he meant. Meaning it's like sometimes Coop will pick up on that and say, yeah, A, B, C, and D. Coop was kind of like,
right,
too many goals allowed, I think, which is fair.
I mean, that would have been my first reaction.
Yeah, in terms of the takeaway.
Yeah, the takeaway, for sure.
Well, we showed fight. We battled back, brought us together as a team. I think Coop was looking at it as we just gave up a snowman and 5 special teams goals. Last time they saw Columbus, they gave up a snowman.
Yeah.
I think they were actually worse defensively in the Columbus game in which they gave up 8 than the game against Buffalo. And I mean, they weren't any great shakes against Buffalo defensively
because the special
either.
teams component to it.
Yeah, I just remember Columbus was getting odd mans left and right. Like the Lightning were not prepared to handle what Columbus was throwing at them. Now, the Lightning were on a huge point streak at that point, finishing a brutal schedule stretch. And Columbus, it was fairly recent that they had made the coaching change, and they had a lot of ground to make up, and they were revved up. So they hammered the Lightning. I know the final score was 8-5, but I mean, they took it to the Lightning throughout that game, and I think circumstances had something to do with that, in addition to the fact that Columbus is a very dangerous team off the rush, and at times the Lightning have struggled with that. I wouldn't say much of the year, but we have seen them struggle at times with teams that are very explosive off the rush, like Buffalo and like Columbus. So tonight, the Lightning have no excuse for coming out flat, which is, I think, what happened in the last meeting between the teams. They are now the team that is scuffling. They are 2-5 in their last 7. Columbus isn't, but Columbus is motivated to try and get over the hump and get into the top 8. I think they're 2 points out of the wild card spot right now. On the wrong side of the tiebreak, though, with Boston. So
we can look very quickly. By the way, see Brad Marchand out for could be a long term.
No, I didn't know
injured
that.
In
well,
the,
I mean,
Panthers game.
The Panthers are playing out the string now.
2 points out. You are correct.
Yeah.
They played 63 games.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is not the whole Eastern Conference picture, but I'm just going to say this from the Lightning's perspective, understanding that the Lightning right now are 3rd in the conference and 2nd in their division. So as I look at the standings, and I'm saying this, understanding Washington is 11th, only 2 points behind Ottawa, but they have more games that they have played. I kind of feel, without saying this is the math, this is not the math, this is my sense of things. The Lightning are in a room with 10 teams with 8 seats. I think other teams are in a more crowded room if they're closer to the playoff cut line.
Are they at the kids' table?
Well, so I mean, when I say that,
No.
if you're going to include Washington, that would be 11 teams. That would mean that the Lightning would have to get passed by, basically all of those teams below them, if we're including Washington in the mix. I kind of feel the games played is like there's just less runway for the Capitals, and they have so much ground to make up.
Sure.
I mean, even as it is, the Lightning are 9 points up on Ottawa with a game in hand. If I said to you, all right, we got 20 games left, the Lightning are 9 points up on Ottawa with a game in hand, you would say, all right, well, the odds of Ottawa catching the Lightning are very, very slim. For the Lightning to miss the playoffs, it wouldn't only mean that Ottawa caught the Lightning, but 7 other teams would have to be ahead of the Lightning. So from my mindset of what do I make of the standings? I feel right now, and I'm saying this, and I'm giving myself grace to change my mind if the Lightning keep struggling and fall farther down the standings in the Eastern Conference. But right now, I feel that it's a room of 10 teams with two chairs that are not available. Right? You got 8 chairs. The other way of looking at it is playoff pace. So Columbus and Ottawa are the 2 teams on the wrong side of the playoff cut line. Playoff pace would have gotten them to 72 points after 60 games. Columbus is at 74 points, just 2 points over playoff pace from 60 games. They played 63. Just to stay on playoff pace in this 10-game segment, the Jackets are going to have to keep winning.
Yeah.
By comparison, the Lightning have 8 games left in this 10-game segment. They need 1 win, 2 points to get to playoff pace. So it just puts things in perspective for the Lightning are still in a very, very advantageous position to get in the playoffs, which is we have been consistent on the show saying that's the goal. Having said that, we want to see them play better. We want to see them feeling good about their game. We want to see them trending upward. We want to see them accumulate more points. But the math, while it's not 1 + 1 = 2, you're looking at the picture here, and the picture is still very, very good for the Lightning. But it would help them even more if they could beat Columbus in regulation tonight.
Yes.
Because Columbus is one of the teams that is in the mix, right, that is on the wrong side of the playoff cut line. And those last thing I'll say about it. If we only had 8 teams, and then there was a huge gap between 8 and 9, which is what we had a few years ago in the East, kind of like, all right, it's basically set. You're going to get in the playoffs where you're going to finish. You want to finish as high as you can. You want to be playing well. We're not at that point. There are other teams that are currently outside the playoff mix on the wrong side of the playoff cut line. Right. They're in the mix. They can get into the top 8. To reach the Lightning, though, I feel that you're looking at Columbus and Ottawa realistically right now. So if you can beat one of those teams head-to-head, that would really help you. Mm-hmm. I'll say the same about Detroit, which is a lot closer to the Lightning. They're the Lightning's opponent on Thursday. You beat Detroit head-to-head.
Love it.
Yeah, but the opposite is also true. If you lose it in regulation, they're gonna chomp off 2 points from that deficit behind you.
It's a good point because I think, when you start talking about those teams who are on the outside looking in but very close to the playoff cut line, also the teams who are in a playoff spot but also they're a losing streak away. This is going to be this is going to be a battle to the end for a lot of teams. So you're right, there's not a ton of separation here. And so I think you have to keep that all in perspective, which is why a game like tonight and a game like on Thursday particularly, you can really make life difficult for those teams who are chasing you to an extent. And I think you're right. So I think that, to me, makes a lot of sense. This question came in from Carl. This team is so injury prone, I'm surprised they didn't also bring up Groshev just in case somebody else gets injured eating breakfast. Wouldn't be the first NHL meal injury this season.
Talking about Jack Hughes. I'm not sure that was a meal as much as liquid diet, right?
Liquid diets.
It was a glass, right? Wasn't a glass at the team table.
Right. Yeah,
anyway,
I think you're right. Mythos jumps in here real quick, partner, and says, what do you think?
I'll just say the reason, so they called up Steven Santini, he's a righty. So Chernak is out and Radish is out. So the Lightning are going to play 6D tonight. 5 of them are lefties. The only righty is the guy they called up. So that would be an argument for bringing up Santini. I think the fan was saying Santini and Groshev, but the Lightning should be okay to play their 6D tonight. Carlisle comes in.
There's a lot of talk about the 6D, 7D. And, that'll probably be an interesting topic moving forward. Mytha says, what do we think of Buffalo? Are they a legit contender? Are they having a Cinderella season? I'm also very worried about tonight. We have done very bad against Columbus this season.
Columbus has decisively outplayed the Lightning in the first 2 games. One of those games happened when the Lightning were really trying to find their game.
Yeah.
The other was when the Lightning were basically at the end of a very grueling schedule stretch and had been playing lights out hockey for quite some time.
Right.
And they exhaled. But they rebounded in the next game. Like they came home and they won the first of 6 straight at home where they won all 6, taking us through the Olympic break. So that second game against Columbus was a blip. But, and again, I wasn't on that trip. That was a game that I called from the studio, but that was a brutal back-to-back for the Lightning. They had the first game in Chicago, so they lost an hour, although I think the game in Chicago started an hour earlier than normal Central Time. But the temperature was like below 0 in Chicago. They flew into bad weather in Columbus. They had, I think a delayed flight. Columbus was there waiting. They'd been on a homestand. Like, circumstantially, the 2 games were tough.
Yeah.
But Mythos is right. Columbus has outplayed the Lightning, and if you don't have your skating legs against this team, they can skate you out of the building, okay? So this game is different circumstantially. The Lightning are at home. They didn't play last night. Columbus did and had to travel. But I think the Lightning are going to have to, at the end of the day, what we have to say is the Lightning have to play better in this game against Columbus than they did in the first 2. Now, what do I think of Buffalo? Buffalo is a very, very good team. Buffalo, similarly, they are a skating team. They attack. They've got skill. Their decor is very, very solid. And although Luukkonen gave up 7 goals on Sunday to the Lightning, for the most part, they've been a pretty good defensive team. They're not top 5, but they're good enough. They're going to get into the playoffs, and they will be a worthy playoff team.
Yeah.
How will they do in the playoffs? Who knows? I mean, you've got some guys with a lot of big game experience, but unless they haven't been on Buffalo when they've had some of that big game experience with other teams, like the Buffalo Sabres that have been with the Buffalo Sabres from the beginning of their careers have no NHL playoff experience. None. Now, Tage Thompson was on Team USA. He played in some high-stakes games. Rasmus Dahlin has a ton of international experience, right? So it's not to say that they have no experience playing in critical games. Alex Tuck has a lot of playoff experience with other teams. Zucker has played in the NHL playoffs before. But it is still different when it's your first kick at the can. And I will say this. If they are on track to finish first or second, which right now they are, you know, there is something about being an inexperienced playoff team having to start at home. Because when you have home ice, you're kind of favored, right? And if you don't get off to a good start and you lose that first home game, the pressure mounts. We've seen that happen with the Lightning before. 2014, it was their kind of first kick at the can with John Cooper as the head coach. They finished second on the last day of the regular season. They leapfrogged Montreal. And, you know, they didn't play very well at the beginning of that series, and they lost the first 2 at home. You lose the first one at home, and now you're like, we have to win the second. There's a lot of pressure right off the bat. Whereas if you start on the road and you're inexperienced, you lose that first game, you're like, hey, we got another crack at this, right?
Sure.
Anyway, I don't know if that's going to happen with Buffalo, but I think the storyline for the Sabres is going to be their lack as a group of playoff experience. And how much will that affect them, if at all?
It usually
But Mike
is.
was asking, like, what do I think of their team? They have a very, very good team. Very good team.
It usually, when you're a team that's made the playoffs for the first time with a core group, usually that first year that you experience the playoffs, don't expect a long run. And I've seen some teams who have built a good core, and then they get into the playoffs for that first time, and they'll tell you that first experience, that first round of the playoffs is overwhelming because of the speed of the game.
Yeah.
And it takes them a while to adjust.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It's a whole different ballgame. We've often made the point on this show, and I think it is correct. I do not think there is a difference in how the game is played when you're talking about the regular season and the postseason than in the NHL. Everything's faster in the postseason. We get it just because the stakes are higher. There's more intensity. The NHL partner, it is just a different animal. The physicality is different. The calls are different. And I think also, too, you're playing a team theoretically for 4 straight games, but probably longer. So there's less of the unknown. You're doing more film work probably. You understand their tendencies. Everything is just different. And it's faster. And it is faster.
Look at what happened last year. So we had 2 teams in the Atlantic that were in the playoffs the first time, Montreal and Ottawa. And they both went out in the first round. They both played hard, though. They both played competitively. It was just a lot of those coin toss games went against them. You know, Ottawa ended up losing in 6 to Toronto. They lost, I think it wasn't overtime, but Nylander, I think, scored very late in the deciding game. And Ottawa started and was down 3-0. I mean, like, it's like they're getting, and they started on the road, but they're getting their feet wet. They were competitive. They were hanging in there, but they lost, right? And then they lost again. Now you're down 3-0. And they, to their credit, won game 4, and then they went to Toronto and won game 5. It was almost like it took them those couple of games to understand what this was all about. Montreal was kind of in the same situation. They were very competitive with Washington, their first-round opponent last year. They were the heavy underdogs. I think one of the games early in the series went to overtime that they lost. They won game 3 at home, and I think they were up in game 4, and then it unraveled on them. That can happen too. like the enormity of the moment, right? Hey, we're a period away or whatever it was of tying the series. And it was like the Caps pushed and the Canadians had no answer and the Caps closed them out in 5. That's what you see sometimes between a more seasoned playoff team. Last year, Washington and Toronto. Washington wasn't, I mean, they had some guys who had been on their cup team, but the year before, they made the playoffs and got swept in the first round by the Rangers. So they used that experience. They were first, but they were a lot better last year. They faced the new kid on the block. So whether it's Detroit on pace to make the playoffs, they've made the playoffs since the Lightning played them in 2016. We just talked about Buffalo.
It's fair.
Have made the playoffs since 2011. How will these teams do kind of getting acclimated to what is happening here in the NHL playoffs? Now, one example I'll give you of a team that did well, and I'm talking about the Lightning, the 2011 group. That was Stamkos' first playoff run, Hedman's first playoff run. They had veteran guys, but they also had some younger guys that it was their first playoff experience. And you remember the series well, Greg, because they played Pittsburgh and they were down 3-1. So even then, like, they were able to rally and win the series, but they didn't start as well as maybe they would have liked to. So,
yeah.
And they were a more veteran team because you still had LeCavalier, you still had St. Louis, you had other guys that, you know, had Dominic Moore was on that team. He had some playoff experience. Bergenheim, I want to say Bergenheim had playoff experience for sure. Simon Gagne was on that team. But we also had some guys that were very new to all of it. Rolison was the goalie. He had experience. That was more of a mix, right?
Yes, right. Dave says, Lightning defense since the break has been shaky at best. What is the formula to return to 60 minutes of stingy? I don't know if there's a formula. I mean,
yeah.
What did they do previously?
Here's how I look at it. And this is maybe not the best example because I haven't skied in probably 30 years. But seeing as we're just coming out of the Olympics, I'm going to use this as an example. So imagine that you're skiing and there's like a red line painted into the snow.
Right.
And you got to keep your skis basically close or on that line. And it's not a straight line. Like, it's moving, right? When you were in a groove, you were basically like right on that red line all the way down. It doesn't take much, though, to kind of veer off target, right? And then you're struggling to get back on track. The Lightning went through a long stretch this year where they were basically right on that red line. And the fact that they did it tells you they can do it again.
Sure.
But right now they're off kilter. So what is it going to take? Some of it is kind of just regaining their form. Like, how are they able to stay on that? It's difficult. It's hard to do. And to your point, like, there is no such thing as a full 60. So maybe you go off the line a little bit, but you get right back on it, right? Your game doesn't go completely off the rails. And I think that the Lightning they've drifted from that line right now. So how do you get back to it? Well, you kind of remember how you got on the line in the first place. Structured hockey, take some of the risk out of your game. You know, don't sacrifice defense for offense, which is basically the same as having too much risk in your game. And being on, you know, it's like confidence. Basketball, you see it all the time. Like, you know, Michael Jordan would say, you know, there's some games I went out there and I just knew I couldn't miss. Like, he's like, I knew the ball was going in. Like, I was basically in a zone. He's like, he loves the zone. You're not always in the zone, even a player as great as him.
Sure.
But, you know, as a team, it's harder because it's not just you. Everybody has to be in sync. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot explanation. More micro is, you know, take away time and space, read plays properly, puck management. This is a very dangerous rush team. Be aware of what they want to do. Yep. Their forwards are gone from the defense. They fly the zone. You got to be aware of that. As much as you can, get pucks in deep. Don't cheat for offense. be aware of the speedy guys that are out there. They're going to look to get the stretch passes. And then you have a guy that is a difference maker in Werenski, who's very hard to defend, but you got to hang in there best you can. So that's what it's going to take. I'm kind of on board on some level with what Hagel said about, like, I like parts of their game a lot on Sunday, the Lightning's game, even though they gave up 8. I don't know if they're going to be able to have a 1 or 2 goals against sort of game against Columbus based on the dangerous players Columbus has, but Columbus gives up goals too.
Yeah.
So just be better. Be better. Build your game up. Try and get points out of this game, too. I mean, they really should have gotten points out of the Buffalo game. If they'd lost 8-7 in overtime of the shootout, this one would sting a little bit less, maybe, coming out of it. I mean, it would still have stung, but the Lightning would have been a point higher in the standings. To take the regulation loss is a bitter pill. So they need to keep getting points. Get some points tonight. Play better defensively. Be aware of your opponent's strengths. Also be aware of your opponent's weaknesses, if I can use that word. I mean, Columbus right now is not shutting things down defensively. So, and they are going to be the more tired team. They are.
You would think.
Yeah.
Haven't played last night. And losing to the Kings. Spectre says, adding Perry at the deadline. Gonzo returns from being sidelined. And Paul expected to return in a week or less. I don't remember a time of the team being this deep on the depth chart.
Their defense has been deep. I mean, they found some guys. I mean, I think some of them they knew were trending up. Some of them they didn't expect maybe to play as well as they have this year, like Destu and James were a little bit of a surprise seeing them in camp and how well they did when they got to the NHL. But I think the overriding story, Greg, and you've talked about this a lot, is how the Lightning have managed to deal with so many injuries. So Perry was an add at the deadline, but they're getting Gonçalves back at the same time that Chernak is now out of the lineup. They just lost Lilleberg in a freak, injury in practice. So it's not like everybody is coming back. Some are coming back, some are going out. And Paul was on the ice today, but he is not playing tonight. So yes, he's getting closer, but not back yet.
This question, let's get to this one right here. B-Love says, terrible seeing Gonzo go down. I felt like he was finally starting to show up. Do you see him going back to the top line or maybe working him in with Perry possibly?
The way they ran the lines this morning, Gonçalves was with Point and Gensel. You had Kucherov with Cirelli and Hagel. You had Gord, Gergensons, Holmberg reunited. They were apart for some of the time over the weekend. And then you got Perry playing with Geekie and Bjorkstrand. So with Gonçalves coming in, Sabourin goes out. The D pair were interesting. So you had Destu and McDonough, and they have played together recently. They were because they split up McDonough and Chernak. Chernak was with Hedman, and then Chernak got hurt. So you got McDonough and Destu. You've got Carlisle with Moser and Hedman with Santini. That's how they ran the D this morning.
Makes some sense with Santini, kind of a stay-at-home guy. If Hetty wants to pinch or join the rush, you've got to think he understands his role. He's not coming up to join the rush in any capacity. I think a lot of people are interested about the McDonough-Chernak dynamic. Is that something that has been facilitated more because of injuries? Obviously, guys have been out. Or is there something there chemistry-wise that's a little bit off? And maybe they're one and the same. When you're not in the lineup and you're battling some injuries, even with your D partner who you've been with for an extended period of time, does it take a little bit of time to get back with what they do? And I don't know, because for the longest time, you could just pencil those two in.
Yeah.
Here you go. By the way, I want to let everybody know tonight, enjoy some Reif Rum, smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule, and Taste by fans are switching. Reif Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Reif Rum by name. Go Bolts, enjoy responsibly. Jim asks, has Connor Geekie done enough to stay with the big club?
Coop was... Either he was asked this morning or he just mentioned Geekie. He's like, he feels like Geekie has gotten better every game.
Yeah.
And he felt like last game was his best game. James is out for the rest of the regular season. So for now, Geekie has a spot. When Paul returns, assuming no further injuries, which is a big assumption because every time we talk about it, as somebody is getting close to getting back in the lineup, somebody else seems to get injured. I don't know what they're going to do when Paul comes back. But we're at the point now, the Lightning can carry more than 23 because we're post-trade deadline, as long as they can make the money work and stay under the cap.
At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation, you can. My neighbor, Lucas, says, very worrying trend of guys cutting down our defense right down the middle. We're blowing past them on the wings like Tuck on a shorthanded goal. Hopefully they get back to basics and keep players in front.
Yeah, the shorthanded goal was a little tricky play for Radish because it was unclear if the puck was staying in and Tuck was thinking offense right off the bat. I mean, he showed a lot of acceleration there. I mean, that was a really nice play by Tuck, who's scored a fair number of shorthanded goals in his career. Splitting the D, I mean, I'm trying to think. So the 3 goals that came off the rush that looked like that, Tuck's was a breakaway shorthanded. Zucker wasn't splitting the D. The D got caught too deep in the offensive zone, basically, and Zucker flew the zone as soon as his goalie made the save. And then the other one was the Carrick play, which wasn't splitting the D. That was an ill-advised pinch in the neutral zone by McDonough, and the guy he checked got the puck away.
Right.
So maybe there are other plays that I'm not thinking of because they didn't lead to goals, but maybe they led to dangerous looks. The Lightning struggled off the rush against Buffalo because Buffalo had some plays off the rush that looked dangerous that didn't go in. But that's about making sure that, I mean, you talk about the F3. Like the F3 is the third forward up ice. So you have the puck in the offensive zone. The F3 is the guy that is staying higher in the zone. In other words, closer to the blue line. So if the puck gets turned over and those 3 forwards on the other team exit, it's not a 3-on-2, it's a 3-on-3. Also, the defense can get caught down low. So the key is when you have the puck in the offensive zone, to make sure that you are ready for a counterattack. That's part of rush coverage.
Sure.
Also, turnovers. If you turn the puck over, the other team can counter on the rush, and that's harder to defend because somebody is going to be out of position because they weren't expecting the puck to be turned over. That's why puck management is a big part of team defense.
I mean, I've got to think that's probably the biggest thing that fuels odd rushes the other way. I mean, you can have breakdowns in your own defensive zone for sure, but, I mean, it's usually turnovers.
Well, the Carrick one was a pinch.
Yeah. Bad pinch.
I mean, the Lightning scored a 3-on-2 goal when Perry scored, and that was, I mean, the Sabres got caught. And that play was made because Radish made a terrific pass. I mean, it was from deep in his own zone across the red line to Kucherov, and the Lightning had a 3-on-2. That was the one where Perry got the feed and kind of walked in front and chipped it in on his backhand.
Lucas also says, I know we have Radish to sign if wanted, but I looked at Puckpedia and Bolts have 21 of 23 guys on the roster and projected $15 million in cap space. When was the last time Julian had so much cap flexibility?
Well, I wonder how many players are on expiring contracts. I know Bjorkstrand is, and he makes over 5.
He does.
But, I mean, you can have cap space, but you have actual roster spots that you need to fill, even if you're filling them with guys making close to the league minimum, you do have to fill those roster spots. But yeah, I mean, it's possible the Lightning will have some flexibility to either re-sign a player like a Radish if he decides to accept what's offered, or maybe, acquire a player via a trade and add salary that way, or sign a free agent.
Kyle says the Gord line needs to get back to where they were. That helped the defense a ton.
And where they were was being good in the defensive zone, but being very good as far as possessing the puck in the offensive zone and making the other team's dangerous players have to play defense.
Get back to being that shutdown line. I would agree with that. Mythos also says, Stills blows my man Ratty only making $950,000. He's about to get a payday. I hope we can keep him. He is.
So we got Bjorkstrand, Radish, we knew about, Perry and Sabarin on expiring contracts, plus Carlisle is a UFA Group 6, which basically means his age wouldn't qualify him to be a UFA, but he's played enough games in the minors that the Group 6 is basically like a UFA. Even though he's not, I don't think he's 27. Like, he hasn't been in the league long enough to reach UFA status, but I think if you've played enough games in the minors, they allow you to be a free agent. Carlisle's 26. 25. Yeah. I have my distance glasses on, so I can see you, Greg, on the camera, and not my laptop
wonderful.
as well.
Love that. I'm glad you can see me, partner. Greg says, how do you see our chances to have home ice advantage through the playoffs? And who do you think is our most likely first-round opponent? Oh, we're getting that Buffalo or Montreal. Way to go, Greg.
Way too early. Let's focus on the Lightning clinching a playoff spot. They still have work to do. I think they would like to have home ice advantage in any series. It is not a be-all, end-all. They had home ice advantage last year against the Panthers, and they lost the series in 5. And we will get, assuming the Lightning get into the playoffs, we will be talking about this as we enter the playoffs. And whatever the Lightning's first home game is, I'm going to remember in my head here what it is, because they lost the last 2 of the Colorado series in 2022 at home. They lost all 3 at home in 2023. That's 5. They lost 1 of 2 in 2024. So that's 1 and 6. And then they lost all 3 games at home last year. So the Lightning are 1-9, talking about at home. 1-9 in their last 10 home playoff games. Vasilevsky talked about that either at the end of last season or like first day of training camp. He's like, that's just, I mean, he was almost in like disbelief that the Lightning would have 1 win in 10 home playoff games going back to the Stanley Cup final in 2022. They won game 3 in that series, but they lost games 4 and 6. There have been some close games in there they've lost. They lost 3 games to Toronto in overtime, but you're not going to go anywhere in the playoffs if you're losing home games regularly. They've also had a very subpar record going back to, is it 2021, I think, in overtime games in the playoffs. We talked about that, too.
Right.
I think you go back, actually, to 2020. Stanley Cup final, they lost Game 5 of the final to Dallas. They won Game 4 in overtime. They lost Game 5. Corey Perry scored the goal in double overtime. I'd have to go back and think. I know they went 0-4 in their 2021 Cup run in overtime. That's 5. They lost 3 in the Toronto series in 2023. Steve can look it up, what their overtime record is. The one they won was against Toronto that extended that series in 2022. That's been their only overtime win in the playoffs since Shattenkirk scored in Game 4 of the 2020 Stanley Cup final. So you're losing a lot at home in the playoffs. You're losing a lot in overtime in the playoffs. They're going to have to change that narrative. So the fan was like, what do you think about home ice advantage? Look, home ice advantage isn't an advantage if you're not winning at home. So Lightning could have won both games in Sunrise last year. Their road record has been much better, actually, in the playoffs.
People don't realize that.
They went 0-3 in Sunrise in 2024, but they went 2-1 against Toronto in their series loss in 2023, and they split last year against the Panthers and Sunrise, and honestly, they could have won both those games. They were up late in the third period of Game 4.
Vlad says Tampa's main problem isn't losing, even though their standings are good. The quality of play, defensive lapses, the decline of Gord's lineup, and the poor goaltending are concerning. Other than that, they're a good team. Oh, it is what it is. Look, the quality of play needs to get better.
I think that's putting it a little excessively.
The goaltending isn't good. Come on.
I mean, people were all over Johansson for the game against Buffalo, and we talked about it on yesterday's show. Like, did he give them some necessary saves that would have really helped them At times he did, but at times he didn't. But there were no weak goals in there. You can't look at one of those 8 goals and say, that was just a weak goal. You know, the Lightning were bad defensively in that game. They gave up a lot of chances, too many chances. And their penalty kill had a problem, right? I mean, actually, I don't have the game sheet in front of me, how many actual shots the Sabres had on their 7 power play chances, but it was a lot. Even when they didn't score, even if they scored on a power play, earlier in the power play, they had dangerous looks. And then there were the ones that they didn't score on where they were also dangerous. I mean, they were dangerous on their 5-on-3 for 2 minutes. So, yes, the Lightning need to play better. I'm not sure that it has gone as completely off the rails as the fan indicated. But his point about the gourd line, like the gourd line gave the Lightning outstanding hockey for such a long period of time. And they haven't been able to regain that form. But they did it for such a long time.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be possible for them to get back in sync.
Sure.
Thank you, Steve. 10 power play shots. So, you know, a number of those were dangerous.
Zebra says, despite all of the injuries, the timetable show we could still have 100% full roster by playoff time, right? Maybe except Gonzo. No, Gonzo back. He's back.
Yeah, I think it would be James.
It would be
James wouldn't be back for the beginning of the playoffs based on the timeline. And Crozier probably too. Crozier was also 10 weeks when they announced it, but I think it would bleed into after the playoffs began. I think the key is subsequent injuries. Like from here until the end of the regular season, can the Lightning maintain their health?
For sure.
By the way, we talked about condensed schedule. So the Lightning came out of the Olympic break, 27 games in 50 days. They have a busy March. They play 16 games in March. That's busy. It is. Columbus has 17 games this month. They had 16. The 17th game was the game that got put in yesterday because it was postponed from January. So I'm going to repeat what I said. I think Columbus gets in. I like their team. I like their vibe. I like the way they've been playing. I think someone above them is going to stumble enough that they could get in, should get in, will get in, whatever.
Could be Pittsburgh.
It could be Pittsburgh. But 17 games in a month, like, you're going to lose some games. You're going to, just the schedule is going to catch up with you. You are not going to go 17 games without losing one in regulation. I mean, they've lost some overtime games recently, so they've gotten points.
Right.
But they're going to hit a point, I think, where they're going to drop some games in regulation just based on the schedule. And so they have to overcome that. The Lightning have a condensed schedule too, but they don't have 17 games in the month of March.
It's fair. TBL Rule says, while we're talking money and contracts, I'd assume they'd get Kucherov extension done this offseason. Would you expect him to get that first $10 million plus AAV for Tampa? You know, it's interesting. I read something about this on The Athletic, and they were talking about how this offseason has the potential to be explosive with player movement and signings, and that the trade deadline wasn't as impactful to a degree that maybe it could have. But they talked about McDavid's contract, and I think it was Pierre LeBrun, and Kucherov's contract.
And Quinn Hughes. Correct. So these are players that have a year left.
That is correct.
After this year. But you can re-sign them starting July 1.
So all I'll say is Nikita Kucherov could demand the highest per-year contract in Lightning history. I know his age, whatever. We can get into that, you know, early 30s, and, you know, what are you going to try and lock him into a longer-term deal? I don't know what that's going to be, but at this point, that's a player that I don't mind giving a lot to per year for an extended period of time. And you just roll with it.
What's the extended period of time, though? So Kuch turns, so he's a 93 birthday, so he's 32. He turns 33 this summer.
Correct.
But he'll be 34 when the new contract kicks in.
Which I get. That's something you have to monitor. However, and this is a little bit of a risk for sure on the Lightning's part, I think you have to look at it and say, is he somebody, even if, I don't think you would call him a blazer, would you, with his skating? He's a good skater.
No.
I don't think you.
What you're saying is his skill set, the way he plays, he should have a longer runway age-wise.
And look, I get that.
Potentially.
That's a guess on my part. I'm just, I think he could run the power play and get a bunch of points that way, even at 38, 39? Yeah, I do. And look, one thing he does, he works at his craft continuously.
Yes.
So I don't know what that contract number is going to come out to, 10, 11 million. Let's say it is for 5 years. I'm throwing out numbers, obviously. I wouldn't look at that initially and say that's too much. Maybe that's how I would throw that back.
And Steve just pointed out this is a projection. The cap is expected to go up, I would say, fairly significantly each of the next 2 years, $8 to $10 million a year. So that gives you a little room to give somebody an extension that would be a pay raise. But how much of that pay rate, all right, the cap is going up. The players know that, right? So the top players might say, well, I don't just want a $3 million raise. I want like a $7 million. I mean, whatever it might be. We'll see. I would be very surprised if McDavid signs an extension short of Edmonton winning the Stanley Cup this year. There was a reason why he signed a 2-year deal, because he just had a contract about to expire. He signed a 2-year extension, right? And he basically was saying, let's see where we are in the next 2 years. So if he's signing a 2-year extension, do you really think last time, do you think he'd really ink another extension just after 1 year? Or is he going to wait and see? I don't know.
It's a fair point.
I'm not really in the weeds on this stuff. So, I mean, that's just a guess on my part. Like you said, you were guessing about Kucherov.
I don't think Julian lets him go. I think you keep him. You won with him. You know how good he is. Some would say he's getting better with age. I mean, look, I think he's at 1.75 points per game. I mean, he's approaching 2, which is something that I think needs to be talked a little bit more about around the league.
If you take out the first month of the season, I think he is at 2, which we can't do. The first month counts.
Sure, that's part of it.
Talks about his pace, since middle of November, let's say.
I know Celebrini is going to get a lot of those MVP conversations. I think I've been making this point with you. You and I have talked about it. I know I talked about it on the postgame show last game, maybe a couple of games ago. I don't think people thought the Lightning would be where they are today at the start of the year. And I know they didn't think they'd be where they are today at the start of the year if you knew all those injuries were going to be happening. And so I think whatever reasons you're giving Celebrini to be the front runner for the MVP, understanding that the second leading scorer, there's a wide gap between the two, and San Jose's expectations to make the playoffs coming into the year, whatever those are that he has exceeded, I think you can say the same thing about Kucherov and the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. I think those balance each other out, and now we just get back into, who's been a dominant player on a consistent basis. It's a fun conversation to have.
Yeah.
But I think it's one to keep that in mind. Zebra also gets back for Mish. Which non-cup playoff run did you have the most fun watching and calling? 2015, 2016, 2018, or 2022?
Fan didn't even have 2011 in there.
That's true. That's a good one, right?
That was another Eastern Conference final appearance for the Lightning. I like them all. I mean, that's probably, it's like, you have 3 kids, Greg. Which one do you like the most?
I like when they all sleep.
You know the politically correct answer, right? Anyway, there were great moments in all of those playoff runs. I remember some of the big moments through the playoffs very, very vividly. I remember the Lightning going to Detroit for Game 6 in 2015, down 3-2.
Yeah.
And that was not the game where Johnson scored in overtime, where they were down 2-0, about to go down 3-1 in the series, and they pulled a rabbit out of the hat. That's a very memorable one. But they had a dominant win in game 2, but that game 6 win, that hardened them, I think, for the rest of that playoff year was the stepping stone of like making them seasoned for the rest of that playoff run and then moving forward for sure, because they were going into a hostile building, and this was not the Detroit Red Wings of the next year where they were fading. This was a team that still had Datsuk, Zetterberg. Like, they had a lot of their main guys that helped them win cups a few years earlier, but they were still on the team. They were a fantastic team.
Right.
Honestly, they should have won the series. They should have. I mean, they outplayed the Lightning in at least 4 of the games, right? I mean, game 4, the Lightning pulled a rabbit out of their hat. Actually, as I say that, they stole game 1. The Lightning should have won game 1. It was a very even series. The Red Wings outplayed the Lightning in game 7. That was the one where Braden Coburn scored to break a 0-0 tie in the third period. But Bishop stole that game for the Lightning. Game 6, though, was maybe the Lightning's most impressive win in the series, going into Detroit, and they were just tough as nails. Hostile building. They took the crowd out of it early. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead. And then I remember the Red Wings rallied, as always happens, right? They made a 3-0 deficit, 3-1, 3-2. I think they had a longish 5-on-3 as well, somewhere in there, maybe to tie the game or to get a little closer. And I remember fairly late in the third period, it was 3-2. Killorn got an in-alone chance and scored on the goalie for 4-2, and then they added an empty netter, so the final was 5-2. But it was a toughen you up type of win. I remember, obviously I don't remember the 5-on-3 that well, but I remember how the Lightning went in there, and you're like, are they going to be able to pull this off? They were shut out in game 5 at home. They'd been outplayed in Detroit to that point, and they responded with a big-time performance. That's just one game that I remember. And the Lightning didn't win the Stanley Cup that year, but it doesn't mean it wasn't a great run.
Sure.
With terrific moments.
Yeah.
Kucherov scoring in game 3 here against the Rangers to win that game. Lightning winning game 7 in Madison Square Garden.
Love that
year. Fantastic.
A lot of good wins.
Yeah.
A lot of good wins. A lot of good series. Not going to win them all, but Lightning have been in enough where it's exciting. Lastly, Kyle says Kuch at 100 points, Gensel at 60. Kuch in on 50% of Tampa's goals. Bolts competing for first place versus Sharks out of the playoffs.
Well, the argument for the Sharks, though, would be the Lightning have a stronger supporting cast than San Jose. And I don't think I'm going out on some major limb saying that. So to the extent the Sharks, and when you say out of the playoffs, I just look, they're a point out of the second wild card. San Jose could get into the playoffs. If San Jose gets into the playoffs, it will be because Celebrini did the bulk of the work offensively for them. Now, the fans arguing that Kucherov has done that for the Lightning, but I don't think you're going to find much argument that the Lightning have a more well-rounded team around Kucherov or with Kucherov than Celebrini has right now with San Jose. Not to play devil's advocate, but look, I think Kucherov should get votes. I think Kucherov has a good chance to win the award this year.
Yeah.
But the Celebrini factor, it's such a, from a non-playoff team to potentially a playoff team or a team that just misses the playoffs with a guy who is a rising superstar who's having an even better year this year than in his first year and a huge gap between himself and everybody else.
You talking about Kucherov?
That is a very compelling storyline.
Right, sure.
Kucherov has already been
Right.
a top player in the league and
He
been
has.
overlooked, right? So it's probably easier to continue to overlook him than to say, well, we're just ignoring what Celebrini did this year.
And
That'll probably be what the people who vote for Celebrini first
I'll end on this.
are going to say.
I think the people, the pundits who talk about, you know, Kucherov and Cooper specifically not getting their due, and yes, you know, the argument is, no, they do get their due. Believe me, they do. No, they don't. No, they don't. They don't. If you believe hardware supports the greatness that you are possessing for that specific season. Now, are both players going to go to the Hall of Fame when their careers are done? And I'm speaking of Coop and Kucherov. You're darn right. The points per game, the wins, the cups, yes. Which makes it even more egregious that John Cooper doesn't have the hardware. And I think that we find that ridiculous. But the fact that either people take it for granted or don't elevate that story or stories enough during the regular season while they are keeping their teams afloat and competing for a Stanley Cup, and in Cooch's case, competing in an era, by the way, where it's McKinnon and McDavid also. And being right there with them tells me that the national media, for whatever reason, is not putting them on a pedestal as much as they probably should. Do we care about it? We bring it up because I find it's gotten to the point it's so out of whack and out of line, I find it hard to believe, which is why I can't take a lot of those things seriously when people start talking about certain players or coaches, because I look at it from the Lightning's perspective and I say, well, where did we swing and miss on Coop and Kucherov here?
Mm-hmm.
Where did
I
we
can
swing
tell
and
you
miss
right
on
now,
that?
Greg, I can tell you right now, we're over time.
Yeah.
So I will finish with this
That's
and then
okay. Well,
hand it over to you. If the Buffalo Sabres do get into first place, they are in first place. If they finish in first place in the Atlantic Division, I'd say there is a strong likelihood that Lindy Ruff wins Coach of the Year.
I think that's fair.
And I'm just stating that.
Yeah, I'm not quibbling.
Even though we can say what John Cooper has done as head coach this year with all of the injuries, the Sabres, so they missed Norris. Norris has missed a lot of time this year.
Sure.
But a lot of their main guy, Dahlin, took some time off.
Yeah.
If you know, like his wife, I think, had a serious medical condition, almost passed away. But he didn't leave due to injury. And, I mean, he's played, I would say, most of the year with Buffalo. Luukkonen had an injury, and they've had Lyon play well. So I'm not saying they haven't had injuries. They have not had to deal with the same level of injuries as the Lightning or some other teams, which that factors in. Like, what did the coach do dealing with the adversity of a depleted roster? The Buffalo situation is a little different because I think a lot of people didn't expect that the Sabres would be where they are. So that's going to be the exceed expectations vote. But Coop will get votes this year, but if the Lightning don't finish in first, I think he's going to lose some votes probably to Lindy Ruff. That's just the way it goes.
And that's fine.
I mean, it's just one of these votes that there are
fine.
always candidates who are going to be a compelling vote. And I believe that Celebrini, if the Sharks get in the playoffs, he's going to get a lot of votes for Hart Trophy because it's a very direct line. I'm not saying that they aren't thinking about it, but it's such a direct line between he's their best player, he got them to the playoffs. Without him, they wouldn't have even made the playoffs. He's getting my vote.
Yeah. I mean, look, that is all fair. And I think you and I are rational enough to look at that and say, yes, there's a chance if that scenario happens that there's some hardware being thrown Buffalo's way and San Jose's way. It's okay for it not to happen either when a team who's been a consistent winner is also having a fantastic year.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's fair to also, it doesn't always have to be the team who exceeds your expectations. I get it. That's a big part of this. But also staying at the top for an extended period of time is equally impressive, or maybe even more. And so I think there needs to at least be some acknowledgement of that. And I think this year, more than I can remember in the past, there's more momentum building for Cooper, Cooch.
At least before the Olympics.
Before
Coming
the
2-5
And let's hope
out
that
of the
doesn't
break.
ruin it. But I
Yeah.
I understand these things are emotional, and we'll see how it happens. All right. So tonight we've got the game. You can listen to it here on these airwaves. You and I will be back at it tomorrow in this setting,
Yes.
recapping the Columbus game. And let's see if the Lightning can get back on track moving forward. Great job, partner, as always. And
You
I'll see you
too.
at the rink tonight. Dave Mishkin there. Thanks to Steve Versnick, Rachel West, and all of you for listening. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.